Why do liberal feminists support sex work while radical feminists do not? Let me put this in perspective for you. First of all, liberal feminists, they are ones that are more in belief of like feminism being about access to employment, access to voting, freedom to choose. Basically, they support women's rights, freedom to choose. That's what they're mostly about, and they are mostly focused on legal reforms and stuff like that, like actual structural changes and stuff like that. While radical feminists, they are more focused on trying to dismantle the patriarchy and trying to make sure that the differences between men and women become inexistent socially, or as little as possible, as minimal as possible. They are trying to make sure that they are trying to reduce the extent to which gender roles are attached to the gender. Roles are attached to people's genders, basically. And they're trying to decrease the extent to which women and men are seen differently in society, are perceived differently in society. Or and also they believe that patriarchy kind of encourages status quo, the current status quo, and tries to stay current status quo. And to actually achieve true equality, they have to dismantle the patriarchy and every form of it. So now let's get into sex work. Liberal feminists, they support decriminalization and view sex work as a legitimate profession that should have legal protections. Their key arguments for this would be agency and autonomy. So they believe that women should have the right to choose sex work if they want to. They should have the right to choose it. So they don't want the fact that that right should be taken away. They don't actually agree with that right. They believe that criminalizing it takes away their autonomy over their bodies, especially. And it instead of protecting women, it actually just takes away their freedom to choose, their autonomy as well. Also, they believe that instead of banning sex work, they argue for labor rights, health protections, and workplace safety for sex workers. So that is improving the lives of sex workers. And for example, you can see that in New Zealand. For example, New Zealand and the Netherlands, Germany, these countries, they've decriminalized sex work. I don't even know if Germany actually had a time where it was actually criminalized, but I just know it's not a crime in Germany. Then in a place like New Zealand, it's more like you can actually report abuse. Sex workers can actually report abuse. There's access to healthcare, and they are protected legally, and they can also work without fear. So, economic choice and empowerment. Sex work can be a rational financial decision for many because it provides independence and control over their lives, especially if they're doing stuff like OnlyFans and stuff like that. Some also argue that when practiced safely, sex work can be empowering rather than degrading. It's more like they feel like they're in charge of something. They're rendering a service. They feel like they're in charge of a particular business that is running, or they're a freelancer which is running successfully. And also, destigmatizing it can actually kind of help with that as well. Um, Also, it's important to differentiate between sex work and trafficking, especially from the liberal feminist perspective. They separate voluntary sex work from human right trafficking, emphasizing that coercion is the problem, not sex work itself. That is being forced to it is the problem itself, not sex work. Criminalizing sex work often pushes it underground, making trafficking worse because people can actually come out to speak. People can actually talk about these things openly, and they have to do it underground. So things actually go unnoticed by law enforcement. Now let's look into the radical feminist perspective. They believe sex work is sexual exploitation, no questions about it. Radical feminists generally oppose sex work because they see it as a symptom of patriarchy and male dominance. Remember what I said earlier, they are very much against the patriarchy, and they are looking for multiple ways through which they can dismantle the patriarchy. They don't really see it that much as a free choice, and rather it's just something that benefits men mostly. The core arguments that they do are sex work reinforces patriarchy. In a male-dominated society, sex work exists because men demand access to women's bodies. Do you get their thread of arguments now? Even if some women choose, in quotes, sex work, radical feminists argue that this choice happens within a system that limits women's options. That is, some of them feel like they have no option but to should I say, concede to doing sex work. According to this perspective, some also believe that sex work is just because that's where men are willing to put in so much money, so women get to benefit the most financially from it. So they're just still serving men and pleasing men whose interests are in women's bodies mostly. Also, they don't actually believe that you can actually achieve true consent under oppression. They don't actually believe that. They believe that economic desperation or societal conditioning forces women into sex work. If sex work were truly a choice, according to this perspective, if it were truly a choice, why do so many women in the industry come from disadvantaged backgrounds? That is, like, they love them. If you ask a lot of sex workers, they will tell you that money was the problem, money was the challenge. Sex work perpetuates violence against women. Radical feminists argue that prostitution and pornography normalize the idea that women's bodies are commodities, that is, they are just objects. They're just objects. They're just basically tools for satisfaction. They often cite research showing high rates of violence, abuse, and PTSD among sex workers. This is true. A whole lot of sex workers have talked about this. A whole lot of sex workers have talked about how the industry changed them completely. They also support the Nordic model. Now, what's this Nordic model? Many radical feminists support the Nordic model, that is criminalizing buyers but not sex workers, as a way to reduce demand without punishing victims. So they actually see the women who are, let's talk about women because they are mostly the ones that dominate the sex work industry. So they mostly see women as victims. That is, women who are actually the sex workers as victims. And they believe that the buyers are the ones encouraging the status quo. So they believe in criminalizing the buyers. That is, those who are encouraging the status quo of women being commodities, women being objects, rather than women who are choosing to sell themselves as such. So they actually believe very much in not punishing the victims, in quotes, who are the sex workers, but punishing those who are patronizing the victims. They believe the goal should be to abolish prostitution and create better economic opportunities for women. So rather than focusing on sex work or trying to legalize sex work or decriminalize sex work, they believe that there should be better opportunities available to women. That should be the focus of the government or policies and the system. So in summary, liberal feminists see sex work as a legitimate choice that should be protected under labor laws, while radical feminists see sex work as inherently exploitative, a result of systemic inequality that should be abolished. And this is one of the most polarizing debates in the feminist circles, with both sides seeming to have very valid concerns. Now, what are your thoughts? What do you think about this? Comment below and let me know what your thoughts are. See you guys in the next video. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you very much.